Boom chicka boom. How do we do, yo? We on? Refresh. Wait for echo. There we go. Hey, everybody. We're live. Bear Lando, I'm going to hit record. We got a lot of slides to get through today. uh,
Yeah, I'll explain those. Man, I just finished those up late last night. Are we on right now?
yeah, we're on. It looks like they got you out of makeup. You're looking good. Went with the hat. Awesome.
Sweet.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, bad hair day, so I had to wear a hat. Um, all right, where is everything here? Okay, I think we're
You're
good.
sounding lovely.
Lovely. That is not a descriptive that a dude likes to hear, but
You're sounding totally epic, bro. I'm gonna stop recording and start over here. Here we go.
lovely sounded a little gay there. I don't know.
Yeah, I was a little pansy on my part. Okay.
But you're just reclimatizing from your trip yesterday, so we'll let it go.
Yeah, I am seriously tapped out right now. I'm trying to get my brain out of this fog. Didn't get home till midnight last night, but I will share a bit when I hit record. Okay, here we go. And boom, we're back for another episode of AlphaCast. I'm Mike Winner, and I'm here as always with the undaunted paladin of truth. How's that for masculine? Dr. Bear
I
Paul
like it.
Lando, coming to you live and direct from the state of Jefferson, where freedom reigns supreme up here on the gorgeous Smith River that hit epic, really almost historic highs. I mean, I haven't seen the river this high. Locals were saying that have grown up here their whole lives ever. We received almost 6 inches of rain in one day. I believe that was on Saturday or Sunday, Bear.
Yeah, it also knocked out my water pump, so I got to go down and try to find that sucker so we have water for a few more weeks.
Well, no shortage of water. Isn't that funny? When it rains, it
Yeah, it's
literally pours.
just a matter of getting it into my bathtub, that's all.
That's what, who needs hot water, right? You just need to you have the outdoor bathtub now, right?
We have
So,
the new bathhouse now with hot water out there, and it draws from a separate water system. We've got a vermiculture composting toilet out there, so everything disappears without any water. So we're
um,
stoked.
we'll have to do some video tours of that and post that on the new platform so people can see all the work that Mark Guyver and you guys have done. It's really cool. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I am.
the next one. We're finishing our pond, and then also putting up a good sized barn here pretty soon. So that'll really help us out going into the next season.
The kettlebell barn.
The kettlebell barn is actually upstairs overhead as we speak in my in the other wing of my house. I got my club bells down here, which are really more my new favorite for rotational core strengthening. Even I like it better even than kettlebells, and it really kind of translates into the martial arts pretty cool. So yeah.
We need to get some videos done with that as well, as fitness is an important aspect of our lives. Well, I'm really excited, Bear, today to jump into part 2 of our End of Medical Mythology series, which part 1 was a big hit, and I'm actually condensing that in an edit, which will come out soon for folks who just want to really dive right into the presentation. We'll do that as well for this one. We do like to always start off the show with some friendly banter, because some of in our community enjoy that and like to hear what we're up to. But for these two, because they are really important presentations, we'll also have edits just with the presentation, really streamlined for folks who want to share this important, vital information to their friends and family who are still stuck in the allopathic mainstream medicine, fear of the cooties mindset. It's funny, we had a meeting yesterday, went down to Mendo to look at the location for Music in Sky 2024. Really excited, Bear. This place is legit. I don't want to say exactly where it is, just know it's going to be in Mendocino, California. And it's going to be on the summer solstice. So June 20th through the 20th, we're deciding if it's going to be like 3.5 days actually. And this is going to be a completely collaborative event like nothing else we've ever done and nothing else I've ever been to, where everybody's taking part in this. People can really get involved in amazing ways. Low ticket price. This is our family campout extravaganza. This location has a beautiful right now. It's a river, but when we're there, it'll be a lovely swimming hole stream that you can float down to the main stage from camp. Tons of space for us to play and build and create. I am so excited, Bear. And also, you'll be there this year because there's no fires to stop us. And it's only, what, like a 4 hour drive for you to be down there. So I'm very excited about
Yeah,
that.
totally stoked. And also, we'll be closer to the Lost Coast and some epic surfing down there between Shelter Cove and Petrolia, where I used to live. I'm wearing, by the way, you can tell I'm sporting my Kelly Slater surf camp hat here.
Mm.
My kids hang out with him quite a bit. He hangs out at my kid's house on Rincon when it's pumping there. And can I do a share screen?
Yeah, please do. I would love to
Tell
just
me
meet
if you can
Kelly.
see this. This is, can you see that?
Yeah, is that your niece?
No, that's my granddaughter,
I mean, your
little
granddaughter. That's what I
grommet
meant.
girl there, and very young age and already shredding it. That's in Kelly's pool there. I got a bunch of other pictures of my two boys surfing there, but they go on surf trips with Kelly, and it's a good crew. They grew up with all the pro surfers in Hawaii and everything, so they're used to that culture as I am. And okay, I will get rid
Wow.
of that.
Bryden has your son has offered to take me there one day. So very excited about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I want to hit it too someday.
Well,
Okay,
I'm
let me get out of share screen here and we'll get on with it. Okay, how do I get out of share screen? Where is that thing?
exit. Well, yeah, that's great. I'm actually rocking our friend Humboldt, a Higher Ground Humboldt sweatshirt in honor of the NorCal and where we'll be this year for Music and Sky. It's just the next county up. They'll be there serving their delicious brews. And Bear and I were just talking about potentially having an Alfa Vedic vending there finally with teas and things we do. So very excited. Check out musicandsky.com. We'll have the official announcement coming in a few days, but save the date right now. This is going to be a big family camp out. Very exciting. And as we, I was just going to say though, as I was going down there meeting them folks, one of the gals, sweetheart, total sweetheart, but was staying distance from us because she was quote unquote sick. And she's like, I don't want to get you guys sick. And I'm like, and it's just kind of like, man, can we move beyond that paradigm? Because that paradigm is so debilitating to society. And obviously it's been weaponized for eons. And also it's just plays right into this sort of victimization. I'm sick, right? Like as soon as you put that in your mind, that mental sort of magic that literally manifest into symptoms and all the sort of calamity that you can run into when you have this fear of the boogeyman, as we call the MTs, as well, the microscopic terrorists, right? Causing you to have quote unquote sickness. So, this is the one of the most sort of revolutionary paradigm shifts that is happening in the 2020s into the 2030s, and I envision a time when we'll be able to more openly speak to quote unquote normies in a way that like, hey, don't you know about terrain? Oh yeah, I've heard about that, and it'll be more of a commonplace discussion. And beyond that, today we're looking to go into deeper into the actual real science behind how the body works, what is disease, and the sort of principles around healing and medicine and all that. So, Bear Lando, how do you want to go from here right now?
Yeah, the germ theory, of course, is the linchpin of really the whole cult of death and scientism. And the main method of control is twofold: it's financial and medical. And of course, it's predicated on survival and the imminent threat of danger and death in every nook and cranny. And to be free of the notion that nature is actually designed to turn against us would alleviate so much clutter from our consciousness and really catapult us into another level of being. And of course, the whole cult is about maintaining the belief in death, degradation, dissolution of the human body, and of course, the other part, the money system, to keep us our eye off the prize by chasing these little tokens that they give us that they say are necessary for our survival. So it's really all one and the same. And having a long career in medicine myself and doing things a little bit differently, I had everything we're going to talk about here proven to me with real life experience, with thousands of bodies proving it out. So I'm not just coming off the top of my head, with conjecture. That's what the other folks do. It's all conjecture. It's all theoretical constructs, as we'll see. So in the last episode we did, it was to really illustrate that I chose 6 categories that I draw from a Bioterrain medical practice that are the only possible avenues that can create symptoms, and not because they are designed to create symptoms, but when things in the natural ecology that can be categorized in this way, whenever imbalances or aberrations happen in each of these categories, then it produces symptoms, which of course is the body's brilliant way of alerting us ahead of time so we can just take care of business and get things back in order. And wouldn't it be great if we knew that it wasn't the body failing or some kind of death molecule that they're still trying to find, to explain why bodies grow old and die, or that we have bum DNA, or that, just the whims of the universe are against us and we're screwed. So, the whole alchemical process, which is what we're going to lead with today as a step 2 to understand what we're trying to do last time, is really the authentic science that has been suppressed. And that authentic science is true to the scientific method, which is empiricism. In other words, just observation to see what really happens out there with your own eyes. And of course, the early alchemists use nature as their model. And it's no mistake that the new cult of scientism is trying to remove us more from nature with artificial intelligence and the like, and also trying to convince us that somehow there's no natural design, that there's no intelligence behind us, and it's just all a big accident. We're kind of an interesting anomaly, a mistake of sorts, and that we're here to obey and hope we don't run out of their tokens before we die. So it's a pretty barbaric, superstitious, primitive state of being. And people are amazed when they hear some of these concepts like germs do not cause disease. But if you understand how we came to that company line, then you'll understand more about how things really work. But as we mentioned last time, you have to understand who's behind this, why they're doing it, and what the end game is. So riffing off of last time, we'll just continue maybe with the first slide, Michael, that will recap where we left off last time. And for the folks that haven't seen that episode, I'd highly encourage that you go back and watch that. And each of these categories that we illustrated to understand the entirety of the cause of all disease, these are very understandable concepts, and not just concepts, but backed with the fact that these concepts also reveal the cure. and at once what we need to do in order to get rid of symptoms. And of course, it's not to try to beat a disease or kill a germ, which of course, neither one of those exist as relative to pathogens or as a disease, having a notion that that's a separate entity that exists independently in nature. It's mythology, pure mythology. So the cause of all disease, part 2. And I wasn't planning on this. We did have a guest, and we had some scheduling change. So like the last one, I did this on the fly. So I did these slides as just a way to keep our discussion on topic, so we can just sort of loosely follow them and see how far we get here. And let's go to slide 1, if we may. So disease, we have a dichotomy. Really, disease is a mutation of normal processes. And it's a mutation that is born of ignorance and by our own doing. And of course, that's where the empowerment comes in, when we find out how symptoms are largely self-created, except for one particular category. Then it gives us everything in the world to change what we don't want. And also that other category that is from external circumstances, we can also deal with that one. So we very boldly stated that the cause of all disease can be attributed to issues or imbalances in any one of these categories. Number 1 is deficiencies. We're not going to go through them all. Again, go back and watch that. And we're going to be developing each of these categories with great elaboration in future podcasts and also in the back end of our member site. So this was just to get us started here. The biome not being germs as they're conventionally thought of, but the biome meaning our ecobionts, which are microorganisms that live inside of us. Life in our biological apparatus would not be possible without these organisms. And these organisms are lying in wait for a job to do. And depending whether they have to clean up some compromised toxic areas of our internal ecology, or gobble up as a scavenger old tissue, cells turn over every single moment, and those cells need to be broken down and discarded. They do that in conjunction with cell debris. Cell debris, which is something I measured, that I talk about all the time with every single patient. And when the cell debris reached a certain level, then that would indicate that cells are being broken down, prematurely aging or dying in disproportionately. And those fragments of cells that I would visualize would then have genetic material and other informational messaging associated with them. And as they entered the bloodstream, they were picked up by the different organs, including the salivary glands in our mouth, and which would then tag our everything that goes in our mouth that we eat, so that nutrients would go to targeted areas to rebuild and rejuvenate, so that it wasn't just a haphazard way of hoping that the nutrition gets to the right spot. Our body is pretty cleverly designed. And also it would, that cell debris would trigger certain cells to make surfactants that would then cleanse up the bioterrain from buildup of toxic elements and so forth. And it would also trigger the cellular manufacture of exosomes and endosomes, and some of their function would be to stimulate the manufacture of new stem cells for regeneration. So pretty clever system. And these cell debris, because of their size and because of their tendency to work with live cells in an informational level to stimulate the manufacture for the needs of the body, these could be confused with viral theory, but unfortunately, the viral theory has built in it the notion of pathogenesis, which means they are maliciously taking over cells to do bad things to us. And of course, we've gone quite a length to really dispel the notion of viral pathogens. Cell debris is a very important thing to understand as an active part in the biome. Now, the 6 stages of disease will help us appreciate how when we get external contamination and buildup of accumulations in the body, the more that progresses, then depending on the stage of progression and the tissue involved, that will explain every single symptom possible that then the medical profession calls a disease and then tries to do something stupid to combat the disease, whereas all they have to do is understand that 6 stage of progression and in a retrograde fashion, reverse the whole process that started creating the diseases in the first place, so-called. The next one there, the line of resistance, is we are able to do laboratory testing and see what the ground current in the body is, because first and foremost, we're electrical. And what we think of as chemistry in the body is literal conduits for this currency flow. And the matrix, the connective tissue matrix, is that medium that the current flows through. And with our testing, we can understand the line of resistance. In other words, is there a correct proportion of conductance, elements that create the amount of energy in conjunction with the flow or the resistance factor that will either impede, slow down, or accelerate energy flow? You want it just right, because in either extreme, it's going to create issues. So with this line of resistance, we can at one glance understand why every symptom in the body works or happens if that currency flow is distorted in some way. It will even tell us what quadrant of the energetic body issues are going to come up with or appear anatomically speaking. And it also conforms to our understanding of waveform mechanics. When you understand every electrical system as a toroidal field, these are all things that we need to greatly elaborate on. We've done a lot of more cursory touching on these concepts because they're new to most people. And, if we don't take them step by step and then follow with elaboration like we continue to do, then it's really hard to wrap your mind around. And then you're vulnerable to falling back into just lazy excuses for why things happen, which is, oh, shit happens, or it just happened to me, or I caught a germ, and so forth. And then, of course, that laziness, of course, carries over to every other part of our life and impedes the real reason why we're here in the first place, which is the rapid expansion of consciousness in the journey of the soul. And that's what we're going to get into more today. If you take these 6 categories, they're fantastic in that they do explain the presence or the etiology of all symptoms. But in order to understand how this can become a pragmatic discipline within medicine, then we have to understand real science and how things work, because we've been brought into a superstition of materialism where everything is fragmented, random, and disconnected. So let's go to the next phase or the next slide and get into that, Mike. And Mike, I'll of course welcome your comments along the way or any questions that come up from the live chat.
Yeah, you're crushing. Keep going.
So the cult of materialistic determinism. And of course, in a presentation like this, I have to just pretty much do a surface glance, but everything here is really right on, and it can be expanded in a way to give more concrete reasons for these 4 simple steps that I have in each category. So if you contrast alchemy, which is nothing more than authentic science that existed for centuries, by people who had the number one goal of healing the human body. That's where they came from, which is much different than our medical profession today, which is prefaced on creating business. So, right there might give you a little bit of a clue as far as which of these two camps you might place your trust in. And alchemy is simply the observation of cyclic patterning. And, this is nothing new these days. We have an abundance of material out there, research, and people talking about the fact that we live in a fractal universe, a holographic universe. That means that there is one particular mechanism that repeats all the way through the different levels of creation. And that's what alchemy was about. It was about recognizing these patterns, because when you do, then you could assume your rightful co-creator role within these patterns and work with them, use them to your benefit, and even expedite the unfolding of these patterns in a way in order to achieve certain goals on both physical and spiritual levels. So in alchemy, cause is directed consciousness. It's electricity. And when I say directed consciousness, because electricity can only come from one source, and that is a conscious intelligence having an idea, a concept, an intention behind that idea that creates an electrical event. We talk about this often, but it's real important to bring this up within this medical context now, because it really explains how the Bioterrain works. And after cause, we have continuity, which is holographic repetition through the etheric medium. So even though there's a different appearance as far as the similar phenomena occurring in different levels of reality, it is nothing more than the same waveforms, the same idea in an electrical form that is appearing in an appropriate phase for that particular medium. For instance, we'll see in a second here, in the etheric planes of the human anatomy, we have the mental, the astral, the etheric, and the physical levels, which mirror the larger strata of the ether of the larger creative realm. So we'll see that in a moment. And now the mechanism that nature works through is transmutation. In other words, form is transient, and form is always changing in a cyclic fashion to meet the demands of what original idea is intending to create in the first place. And also, in the case of biology, it is a transmutational process that allows microbes, inorganic elements, everything we think about as far as being a component of the biological realm. It is actually allowing one form to take another form to meet the demands of a constantly changing environment. Going back to a microbial example, if, for instance, the body needs to clean up some issue that's affecting the skin that somebody would call a staphylococcus infection, that's really the seed organism that already lives inside of us that has the option of transmutating or mutating through 16 possible stages of development. These are things I've seen for years with my own eyes under the microscope, so it's not conjecture. And in that transmutable or that transformational process, 3 of those 16 stages pertain to the bacterial stage. One of those bacterial stages is Staphylococcus, the coccus form, the little round bacterial forms. And in that phase, they are very efficient at gobbling up debris maybe that got, trapped in the dermal levels, maybe from a surfing accident, and getting coral embedded in there. or any other particular thing. And they will also gobble up all the diseased tissue around there so that other worker bees can start regenerating brand new tissue. Same thing with the elements, as Walter Russell and waveform mechanics described and really demonstrated, is that every element on the elemental chart that we learn in high school chemistry is also transient, beginning with hydrogen, going through all the different octaves and tonal fields within each octave. That hydrogen will do a loop with time and become every other element, and then come back full circle, become hydrogen again. So that's a simplistic explanation, but that's kind of the way nature works. Nothing is fixed. And if you understand that, and if you have, for instance, an individual that is presenting with symptoms or a diagnosis, we can use that understanding to promote proper organism populations. It will help deal with that, help supply different elements that are then going to allow the cells to have the proper resonance to heal or renew any part of the body. And let's go to the next one. The purpose of the whole alchemical understanding, nature's purpose, that is self-determination. That is, if you get to the kingdom of man, which we're going to talk about in our last slide, we are endowed with the ability to become individualized through this alchemical process that we call life, and become self-determined co-creators. Now, the opposite of self-determination is thinking that you're going to die because some freaking little bug, just jumped on you after you touched a doorknob or something. And then, of course, it goes into all the other topics we cover on this channel, which has to do with lawfare and finances and everything else. So at every possibility, this concept of self-determination is stymied. And of course, in the beginning of our country, what got us off on the great experiment of self-determination is the founding folks decided to formalize that self-determination with a declaration. And that's what we're all doing here these days. We are declaring our independence from all this bullshit, starting with the medical mythology. Let's just take a quick look at scientism, then we'll move on. Scientism, as opposed to simply observing nature's cyclic patterning, it's comprised of conjectured rationales. Cause, rather than being directed intelligence, is random accidentalism. As far as continuity that we understand,
too, cause for
Go
them
ahead.
is just the cause of the effect must be just some sort of moving object. That's how reduction is. That's how simplistic and stupid scientism is. It's not even taking into
Yeah.
any sort of expanded concept of cause. It can only be like a rolling ball going down a ramp to hit something. I mean, it's
And
so.
since we really don't know the creative mechanisms in the first place, then we just say, well, shit happens, the Big Bang, all that. And now that materialism just randomly happens out of thin air, even though we don't even believe in a concept of ether, which would allow us to understand how creative waveforms have a medium to travel through and coalesce with other waveforms to create composites that we call our realm. We just have all these random material BBs that somehow have energy in them. So we have to dig these up from our realm in order to, create explosions that create a temporary isolated instance of energy. And then we have to keep gobbling up ourselves, our food supplies, our resources and everything, which puts us in kind of the termite category, actually, rather than self-determined co-creators. And then the purpose, of course, we know, opposite of self-determination, is social engineering. That's all this is about. And to understand that, you have to understand the who and the why. And if anybody has any doubts about this, just look at what's going on in Davos in this exact moment right now where they're just literally telling us how it's going to be in order to live carbon free, which is interesting because carbon is the capacitor or grounding rod for our whole etheric structure that creates the consciousness creates physicality through in the first place. And without carbon, there's nothing to ground it in. We wouldn't be here. Nothing would be here. So anyway, kind of stupid stuff, but like the old circus folks said, there's one born every moment. And but you know, their audience is getting fewer and fewer. We're winning. Okay, next slide.
The fewer, the fewer, the fewer. Yes, sir. And yeah, and I was going to say when you're talking about Staphylococcus, Pamela brought up pleomorphism in the chat. And yes, that's a great example of biological transmutation, right? Bear is the pleomorphic cycle of those microbes.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I look a little bit different right now than I used to when I was a teenager. So even the human lifespan is typified by going through different phases. The only thing I would quickly add to that is it doesn't have to be a dissolution kind of affair where your body just dissolves into crepidation, old age, and death. So we would naturally go through different phases, which correlate with our gathering of wisdom along the journey, but it doesn't have to be accompanied by illness and decay. So here we are, from elements to principles. What I'm going to do here, Mike, and I know you haven't seen this either yet, I'm going to take, like we did a little bit last time. I think the first slide I did last time was this chart that was more expanded, but had some of this in it. And I'm going to break down that chart a little bit to hopefully illustrate the continuity of holographic repicturing as far as how things begin from consciousness and translate down to our ultimate biology at the most minute levels. So if we can just borrow from the old alchemical terminologies, the first column is elements, and they thought of them as three elements: fire, air, water, earth. We don't have to go through all that. Now that corresponds with the levels of the ether. Now the ether, you can actually understand more from a Western mindset. So that's what I like about doing it this way, is we don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because there were some things that we've, you know, that I learned in school and in my studies that went beyond just terminology, but helped me understand not just the mindset of conventional chemistry, but also there's kind of a place for it, and it can also be explained more elegantly within the context of waveform mechanics. But it allows us to have a conversation, you know, from a mindset of conventional contemporized chemistry. So the fire element would be hydrogen, and of course that is the spark for that initial electrical spark that comes from what we already described as pure consciousness. And then that hits the next level of ether, what they call air, and that would be nitrogen. And nitrogen has a coagulation effect. And in the ethers, that original idea actually starts the first stage of precipitation or densification as it's exposed to the air or nitrogen element. We see that working in nature all the time. I always use the example here on the farm. I see the leaves starting to fall in the autumn, and that's because the cold air creates a greater abundance of nitrogen in the atmosphere, which creates a coagulation within the sap of plants and trees. And then that impedes the flow, just like the flow of blood to a limb. It impedes the life-giving resources to the limbs of the tree and the leaves just shrivel up, turn colors, and die. So nitrogen, if you understand these levels of ether, it's happening all around us. And the big thing I'd really like to facilitate today is to take alchemy out of the mystical realm, because alchemy is something that we are doing every single moment. If somebody fixed themselves a cup of tea this morning, they're actually doing laboratory alchemical practices. And, those all have names in a fancier alchemical lab. Uh, every single day when we get up and have another life experience, we are taking the soul further down the road in through the transmutational process of life, and which we'll get into what that means from an alchemical perspective. Now, when that first stage of coagulation happens, and then it enters the next level of ether, which is a water element, we have a further densification that's correlated with oxygen. And then water becomes the first fixed medium relative in our physical realm. And that becomes a transmitting utility for the informational fields that originally came from the very top down, from the fire hydrogen pure consciousness level. And those informational fields are then transmitted down into the grounding structure of our realm, the earth, and that has to do with the carbon element. Now, if we go to the right of the ether column and we go into function, well, the function of the fire element is electricity. The air element is coagulation. The water element, which is, again, this is simplified because it's kind of mixed up in the different strata. But for the sake of talking, water is a further process of fermentation after coagulation. And this brings in an understanding that I could talk to a chemist about as far as the manufacture of ammonia compounds within that coagulation or fermentation process. And that is a very important component in the final precipitation of what our senses pick up as far as form and function within the earth realm. And now these four elements, ethers, and functions, which hopefully we can just see a continuity of what each element, what its purpose is, those then are coalesced into three principles that the alchemist spoke of with great import, and that is sulfur, which is the individualization of consciousness, what we could call the soul. The plant kingdom has this sulfur or individualization in over soul experiences. For instance, a plant of a certain species, say Schizandra berry, is all the berries, all the bushes of that particular family are an oversoul, which just means a group soul. But in the kingdom of man, we have the ability to be individualized consciousness, each and every one of us, and not just a member of a larger oversoul. Now, Mercury is what in other cultures we call prana, chi, and so forth. And to an alchemist, Mercury is that anonymous energy of the Godhead, of the Creator, that is waiting to be individualized by consciousness. And then, of course, the Mercury, which animates the sulfur, while sulfur defines the Mercury, then that is embodied in the grounding medium of the earth, the carbon, and that we loosely call the body or the salt. And sulfur, mercury, salt are to be understood in this particular instance as more allegorical terminologies rather than what we would think of as far as sulfur, mercury, and salt in a chemical sense. So how are we doing, Mike?
Holy Trinity, the body, mind, and spirit, or the soul, spirit, and body, being the salt of the earth, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. This principle, the triune self, is historically ingrained and intertwined in every great tradition.
And we've all heard of all of these things independently, but unfortunately, institutionalized science, religion, and so forth has made it their job so that we do not connect the dots and see how it all works as a whole under our very own direction. So, this chart is to illustrate how, from the elements, we go to principles, which are the first big over the hump step to create our experience and our very bodies.
And
And
this
again, if you don't
this
understand this flow, then it's going to be constantly bringing up questions as far as our original premise, and that is that disease and microbes don't cause disease. There's other causes for it. Here are the mechanisms that cause what we think of as disease, but it's all predicated on understanding how nature works. So let's go beyond principles now.
I was going to just say this quote you have here is really good too from Paracelsus. As nature is extremely subtle and penetrating in her manifestations, she cannot be used without the art. Indeed, she does not produce anything that is perfect in itself, but man must make it perfect, and this perfecting is called alchemy. Paracelsus, the great work. And this is a core fundamental in, once again, all these wonderful traditions from the Masons to Gnosticism to a lot of Eastern traditions. This idea that we live in this on a plane and a reality that is derived from consciousness, and that nature is just the mechanism in which it works. It is not. It requires the interplay between our consciousness for the whole dang thing to work. We can't just go jump into a tinfoil ball or a tube and fly out of here into the vacuum of space and go live on another rock somewhere because literally this place is the divine realm that is we co-create. And it's just that's the really important subjective qualitative aspect of the true sciences right there.
Yeah, and to further demystify alchemy, in alchemical circles, we're always talking about the great work. And a lot of times it suggests that you need to go out and get a lab and, start doing all sorts of crazy shit in there. But it really, you're doing the great work as soon as you become conscious of the fact that you have a purpose to your embodiment. And before we become conscious of what that purpose is, then we're basically a barnacle on the larger ship, and we're really not doing ourselves or the ship any good. To borrow from medical terminology, I would call that level of unconsciousness as a space occupying lesion.
Yeah, the great work is just about being the way and understanding that once you are the actor in the active sense and not the just sort of victim in the sea of chaos. It's just a nice, it's just a shift, as you said, of consciousness. And then all of a sudden, everything starts to unfold where you start participating and taking action in your life and realizing that the best way to do that is of service and all those good things we talk about, being the way of the way. And then it's quite effortless to do it. Okay, next slide.
So now we're go from the etheric planes to physiology. So we're gonna get further down the creative path here. And if you recall, we had the levels of ether, which started with the alchemical elements. But now we're going to translate that into the etheric medium of the human body. Because just like everything that I'm staring at outside my window here had to go through those four precipitating stages toward materialism, the same thing in our body, and our body to hold true to that as above, so below sort of idea. And the fact that it is a continuous process that we are not separate from. We have our own representation holographically of the larger ether. And it starts with the mental plane, which is where, as individualized members of humanity, we have the capacity for idea. And if that idea then is held in a focused fashion and meets the next level of coagulation, which we talked about as far as the air and nitrogen element, well, now we're talking about the astral element. And that is going to have a lot to do with how we feel, and our passion, our intent, and our emotions are then going to add the intensity to those informational fields from the mental plane, which will then start the materialization process, but without the right or intensity of passion or emotion, it's going to stay a mental concept. Or if we have a toxic lower astral emotion associated with it, it's going to create stuff like disease. So, or the notion of limitation or some such thing. Now, as that intensified information reaches the vital level, which we correspond to the water or the oxygen level, that transmitting utility toward final physicality, then it's going to create an etheric imprint, which will then be used by the cells of the body as they receive those creative 12 creative resonant fields from the constellations above by way of the capacitors in the ground we call the inorganic cell salts. And through those 12 informational fields, they will then create all the tissues of the body, as well as the distributing the resources of the body to exactly where they're needed for a constant state of renewal of form and function. So if we look at the etheric medium, no different than we did a moment ago with the larger ethers, this is how it's individualized on the human level. And also, just to illustrate some of these two, how that would look in a practice, well, there are many techniques that allow us, ones that I've used for years, that allow me to not just test on these different planes of existence, but they each have subplanes, and then correlate that with different levels of not just etheric function, but also with real physiology, so that it allows me to prioritize as a practitioner where on that energy matter continuum my efforts would best be focused in order to bring order back to the larger bioterrain. Now, if we move to the right of that etheric column, we look at the process. The process of the mental plane is imagining. And coincidentally, or curiously, I should say, the first thing we learn as children is, well, you don't want to just sit around imagining things because it's not real. You got to get focused on what's real, which is all the material stuff that your senses are reporting to you right now. And of course, that stymies our progress from step one when we lose that real focused ability to imagine in detail, accompanied by the understanding that imagining is a real electrical event with consequences. And the processes of the astral are more getting into that emotion or the, intensifying the movement of energy that come down from the original informational fields. The process with the vital is to create that literal electrical imprint, a blueprint that becomes the form for the physical body that the cells then complete. And now, just like these four processes and etheric levels, as we saw before, were then used by the alchemists to understand the three principles that then translate into all creation. When it comes to the physiology of the physical body, instead of calling it sulfur, mercury, and salt, we're going to get into the terminologies that relate to matter, the matter that is the stuff of our physicality. The first part, the first two parts don't seem that physical, but they are responsible for the physical. That's the soul, which is now through self-determined efforts, using all available in order to create personalized experience according to our desire. So that is the soul. And then we have spirit, which is that anonymous energy that is defined by the soul, and that is flowing through us all the time, through our nervous system, through our meridians, and in a myriad of ways that are conveying these informational fields from those finer, subtle levels into our physiology. And then, of course, the third level of matter that corresponds with the salt is the body. And now, if you take these three principles of matter into the anatomical, the individualized soul, the sulfur, is exactly what, through what Steiner and people like that, Goethe, called metamorphosis, creates the torso. And the torso, of course, is the container for our vital organs. And then if we just step over to the right again into the function of those organs, it's to create metabolism. Metabolism it loosely defines all of the processes in the body that create energy so that we can animate our physiology and form. And then the spirit, which is that anonymous Mercury that the soul uses, that is portrayed into the extremities. And if you think about it, the extremities, what do? Well, they're freely moving. They hang off of the torso, and they have a greater range of motion. And through them and through the exertion of the will force, if you want to get up, and off the couch and walk to the refrigerator, the extremities are then going to translate your desire, your will force, into ambulation. And that is a direct translation of spirit. Spirit is movement. And if you get into concepts of prana and chi, chi as defined in Chinese medicine is what creates the movement of energy through the body. And then, of course, the body itself, or the salt, that is what is going to be most exemplified or translated into the physical tissues of the cranium and the nervous system. If you look at the cranium, it's the most fixed, impenetrable structure as a protective mechanism for the delicate neurological processes. And that cranium then is really going to, be symbolic of that solidification, and also the housing the neurology that is through the 12 cranial nerves in that neurology is going to directly perceive or pick up the resonance from the 12 constellations in the sky clock that are going to further direct the activities of the cell in conjunction with the inorganic elements that the cell uses within the bloodstream. And then that neurology, as we hit on a little bit, you did as a matter of fact, Michael, that this neurology, when it brings down that information through the cranium, then that in turn brings life to the metabolism, but there is a death process in that the neurology has to burn up neurotransmitters, manufacture and dissipate at the same time neurotransmitters that convey those messages to make metabolism happen. But then metabolism, now that it is given life through neurology, even though neurology gives its all in the process, turns around and allows the next wave of neurological informational fields to to come in, and we can get into great analogies of yin and yang. Yin being the metabolism, the yang being the neurology, the metabolism being the lunar element, the neurology being the solar element, so forth. So, how we doing?
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, it's literally how the engine of our body works, right? It's the death life cycle that's happening every fraction of a instant. Um, Question, what about the generative system? How does that relate? Is that considered part of, I mean, and this all makes a lot of sense. Torso, soul, related to the heart, especially as you really think of what's in the torso organ wise. You have the heart, which of course is sort of the window to the soul, right? And then you have the lungs, which of course is the breath, which is the breathing in the soul, all that. What about the generative system? The you know, the nether regions, if you will. There's this concept of the alchemical wedding, right? Where you have the golden juice coming from the top, from the glands from your neurology down through along the spine to the generative system, and then back up for what classically has been called the alchemical wedding. And that is, of course, very esoteric, but the idea is that that is how we sort of reach the ascendant state by mastering that. How does that relate to these three anatomical functions here?
Well, it's only esoteric when we fail to understand that the original allegorical explanations, not only being much more elegant and in depth compared to mechanistic explanations, but the journey through the sky clock, through the 12 constellations that follow the signs of the zodiac, is really the blueprint for rebuilding the temple as the original Masons understood, and what they were really about originally before they were infiltrated, which is why everybody says Masonic teachings are bad. But everything was infiltrated. So as we always say too, let's stop all this broad stroking and understand what the original teachings were really about. Now, in that allegorical zodiac schematic, what we're really looking at is the embryological unfoldment of how the human body gets put together one step at a time through a composite of resonance sequentially transmitted by the constellations. So it, of course, starts in spring, the time of renewal. We have Aries, and Aries, the ram is really a representation of the two horns of the optic thalamus, with the little spark that is carried through the third ventricle, the water medium between the pineal in the back and the pituitary in front. Then that original spark allows the electrical transmission and reception. And that then is carried down the brain stem into the representative sign of Taurus. And Taurus, being the brain stem, then takes that electrical impulse down to the next level, which we could go through each one of them. But then we get into Gemini, and Gemini creates all the branching structures in the body, our neurology, the neurological branches, the branches of the whole arterial and venous and lymphatic system. And that is translated into the chemistry. Then it goes down to the that original essence that you're alluding to. That's all part of the process. Now that's picked up finally and housed in the next sign, which is Cancer, which is portrayed by the crab. And what's the crab do? The crab has a hard shell, and it carries its eggs on its abdomen to protect them. And in the case of the physical anatomy, the human anatomy, we're really talking about this energy that was understood in Chinese medicine called the triple warmer, where between respiration, nutrition that we get through the digestive process and so forth. It's a triple process that then carries the life force, in this case, to the spleen, which then is going to be carried down to the next signs, which is Leo, the heart, for circulation. And finally, a couple after that, year after your sign, Virgo, and the next one, Libra. Then you get to finally the Scorpio, which is going to be really the embodiment of the reproductive organs themselves. And so that now you have that final marriage where we can reproduce ourselves and replicate ourselves, not just in new human forms, but on all levels of life.
Libra
So, yeah,
being
when we
Libra before
understand all
that
that,
being
yeah, the more we understand what they were really saying, then the more you can prove it out through medicine. And it's important, again, to do the great work. I, for whatever reason, chose a vocation of medicine. Well, I know the reason. It's kind of personal, but it's, things I needed to learn. So medicine was my initial laboratory that I proved out these processes. And they work when you stay true to the way nature works. And, same thing, we talk about the Spagyrix lab and everything else. So we've gone from etheric to physiology. We have another little quote down there if you want to go over that one or not.
Yeah, I was just saying in Libra, of course, the scales, right, which is the important judgment of how the great work's going for you and what your true intentions are and what you're truly doing, as you become honest with yourself. And yeah, it's all about the vocation that you choose in your life, and how you be and how you act. So important.
Yeah. And as far as physiology, Libra and the scales of justice, it's really about maintaining proper resistance levels in the fluids, which we commonly refer to as pH. So it's about holding that neutral balance. And in the science of ionization analysis, which I talk about, which is a laboratory procedure, we use that whole line of resistance in order to create balance, not these more shallow concepts that the pH of the saliva needs to be something and the urine pH something else and the blood pH something else. No, it's about maintaining ideal balance on our way to perfection, and constantly, even though not being ideal or perfected yet, we constantly move in that direction. And Libra is the one mechanism in the body that maintains that balance of the resistance, or what we could also call the speed of electrical flow, or pH. And then we could talk about the cell salt involved, which is natrium phosphoricum, and bring all sorts of things in. And when that's in short supply, then we get into a symptom that could be correlated to pH disruptions. And then that pH disruption is going to create a symptom that a brilliant doctor type is going to say you have this disease and you need to take something for it. And in fact, it's a deficiency, which is one of the categories we went over last time and touched at the beginning of this episode. Okay, where are we at here?
Yeah, whoops, messed the slide there. I think we're back. So here's the quote. One has to understand that the medicine must be prepared in the stars, and that the stars become the medicine. Okay, next slide.
And that is really getting the point across that all creation, all health, all balance comes from the resonance of the sky clock, that then translates through the medium picked up by the inorganic elements in the bloodstream. And that resonance conveys into function and form, but it all starts in the stars. So when you're making plant or mineral medicine in your laboratory, you understand that's what you need to harness first, which is why in the alchemical arts, you have to appreciate that there are certain resonance that are prevalent at different times. And depending on what you're trying to do or what your preparations are made from, when you time it when that natural resonance is more predominant, then you're going to accelerate your processes and intensify the potency of those eventual remedies. Okay, so now we're translating. Remember, where did we end up? We're with the different levels of anatomical differentiation based on the three principles. And now we go from metabolism and neurology and so forth into the next holographic step down, which is the germ layer of our physical body. And again, we have to default back to embryology, in that there are three germ cell differentiations. The endoderm, and this is kind of just loose because we can get more detailed, but you'll get the concepts across. Endoderm is that cell germ that differentiates into all the vital organs of the body that are typically under the control of the brainstem. And then the mesoderm, which would coincide with what we're talking about with the extremities in the slide before. The endoderm with the anatomical portion, the torso and the organs, the mesoderm, the extremities, and the musculoskeletal system. So the mesoderm makes all the musculoskeletal components as it embryologically unfolds. And then finally, the ectoderm creates the skin structures and all the neurological structures and other things as well. And that becomes important because, again, you see a translation of that same trinity into the actual tissues of the body. And then to make things more interesting, it's very apparent in this work that certain stages of microorganism pleomorphism, that is, again, the mutation of innate organisms in our body changing to higher valence forms along those 16 phases in order to become, maybe if the endoderm has a process going on that needs help from the ecobionts or the little biological actors that act as scavengers, clean things up, regenerate tissues. They do a lot of things for us. The endoderm, when it has an active process in those related organs and tissues, then there's a tendency for those life cycle forms of ecobionts to go into the fungus and mycobacterial phases, because that's where they're most useful for facilitating active processes, or what we would consider disease, but making sure that those processes that are actually designed to heal and not a disease at all go full circle, do their job. And it's not possible unless there's a pleomorphic progression of the symbionts, in this case, that evolved embryologically and in other levels of evolution with the endoderm tissues. And it goes a lot deeper than all this, as you might imagine. And, then those phases of activity are forever paired with the endoderm and the maintenance of the perpetual renewal of those tissues in the body. We could go over one more step and even show how there's a symbiotic relationship between certain inorganic element categories with the endoderm, the fungi, the mycobacteria, and that's your natrium elements, your ferrous or your iron elements. Drop down the mesoderm, again, which is the musculoskeletal tissues, the ecobionts that have evolved to facilitate the health of that tissue in the body, are the bacterial and mycobacterial forms. And then the ectoderm, it's interesting, the ectoderm, which is, again, the neurology and skin tissues, when they are in need of support on the biological level, it actually comes from the cell debris. Now, in the original Enderlein material, Gunther Enderlein, we could say is a father of pleomorphic microscopy, because he was first identifying how these endobionts routinely travel through different mutational stages. Another person, Gaston Naissance, who we talk about too, who, I've studied with him as well. He came up with the same understanding. But they talk about, especially when you get into the original German pharmacies that create isopathic remedies that are the protein seed preparations from these different innate organisms in our body. They talked about certain ones like penicillin frequentins as an isopathic suited for viral conditions. Now, they weren't talking about virus the way the Anthony folks are these days. They were talking about viral conditions within a whole different understanding. And again, I just add my understanding from my own experience. When the cell debris becomes of a certain titration, in which it's from the cell debris conveying messages to the entire bioterrain, so that all these mechanisms can come to the rescue of certain tissues that need to be rebuilt or cleaned up or whatever. Then the cell debris are really the instrumental, not organisms per se, but the ones that trigger all these other things that also are activated in the endoderm and mesoderm tissue. And then we also have a predominance in the stages of development of the pleomorphic organisms into kind of your potassium and magnesium elements that have that symbiotic relationship, because they have everything to do with nerves and so forth. And then also magnesium being very important for the heart, which is why it's paired with Leo, which is also correlated with the heart. By the way, you mentioned heart a minute ago, and there's been some great presentations. Tom Cowan's done an amazing job as far as showing how the heart is really not a pump. To that, I would like to add, though, that the heart, and like any other organ or tissue of the body, is created by motion. So preempt, or not, how should I say this? Before the heart tissue actually coalesces into the form of what we recognize as a heart, there is a distribution and manufacture of different vessels that then carry fluids, and the motion of these fluids and other elements that are necessary for distribution throughout the body. The nature of that flow then turns around and dictates the form of the organ. So the heart, not only is it not a pump, but it's not even created as an organ because that is its initial archetype. It is actually forming according to the needs of the body, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it is like I said, it's the doorway to the soul, right? So it's going
And
right
if you,
from the form plane. Yeah.
and really the point to be taken is that energy creates matter. And even when the body is requiring a physical organ, which is in actuality a dual vortex that energetically supports the propelling of these fluids through the body, it is created through the movement of energy first, which goes back to our very first slide, which is energy creates matter, and matter isn't some vesicle containing energy. It's just the end product. And of course, we have a complete inversion where we're trying to think of things or figure things out or come by solutions in an actual backwards fashion.
Yeah, I love the dual vortex plasma generating machine like functionality of the heart. And it's interesting you mentioned magnesium, which makes me think of magnetics, which of course there's a lot of interplay between the heart and magnetic flow. So all of that is really working together nicely.
And I chose this quote here. I actually just made this one up, but I have it down there anyway. Simply put, nature is motion through transmutation. So, what creates motion? Motion is created for the next creative step. So, you have the motion if you trace through those ether layers and through the etheric layers. You have idea translating through those layers into eventual form, and the actual traversing downward through those etheric layers is a motion that then eventually creates the form. So it's the motion that's creating the form. And alchemy is a demonstration of these principles.
Need to have that Dr. Bear Lando under that quote. Okay, next slide.
So now we come to the alchemical process. And there are many ways to talk about this. We, in some circles, they talk about 12 principles, 4 principles, 4 and 3, 7, and, and so forth. So let's just distill this down to its most basic, which is to separate, purify, and cohabation, which is putting back together, which we've talked a lot about making, say, plant medicine. First thing you do is you go through laboratory procedures where you separate the plants, in this case, the principles, the mercury, the sulfur, and the salt of the plant. And then you purify all those 3 levels. And then you go ahead and put them back together. And that recombining in a purified form is going to more closely mimic what nature had really intended in the first place. And the only time we have illness is when we deviate from those natural patterns. So all you're doing with your plant medicine is to really getting back to those pure game plans. And in the case of treating the human body in what we would think of as a medical practice, you do the same exact thing. So separation, you're going to isolate the 3 states of matter, the 3 generative qualities, and the 3 principles. And 3 states of matter being, as we've already discussed, spirit, soul, and body. Generative qualities, we, just loosely in alchemical terms, we'll call them wet, hot, and dry. But when you get down to the ground matrix, you're talking about the generative elements that are produced from those qualities. And that is living cells, ecobionts, elements, and so forth. And then the 3 principles are the mercury, soul, and salt. And with that understanding, from an perspective of anthroposophy, you can even look at a body, the 3 components that are the translation of the mercury, soul, and salt, the musculoskeletal, vital organs, and nervous system. And by just simple observation, you can tell where imbalances are at an immediate glance, but then go back to the symptoms, because people usually come to people like me with symptoms, but I can look at those symptoms now in a cohesive whole and understand what step of the whole creative continuum or regenerative continuum things are stuck, and intervene on those levels with real grounded, precise medicine and intervention that does not have anything to do with a doctor thinking that he can somehow outsmart the creator. Early on in my career, I came to the inescapable conclusion that there was no body I could possibly outsmart. So instead of trying to do that and then come up with treatments to boot that would actually override what the body wants to do in the first place, which is going to make it even sicker, I decided it would be more intelligent to try to figure out how to communicate with the body. And then, of course, when you go through all these channels to help the body deal with the aberrations that have happened at any one of those precipitating steps relative to the maintenance of their physical body. Then after a lot of good work, we can have a purified whole that is put together more according to its original design, according to universal patterns. And medicine is about the realignment with those universal patterns for renewal and expansion, and not expansion of body tissues so much. Here we're talking about the expansion of consciousness, which will allow us to get rid of the notion that there's a need for doctors in the first place. And what I told every single client I ever saw in all my years is that you don't need me, and my job is to convince you of that. So next slide, I guess.
I was just going to say what I love about this, the practice of this, like, for instance, if you're doing spagyrics, which is a very obvious example of this practice with using herbs, is that it's like a microcosm of that macrocosm of the great work we were discussing earlier, right? In the act of doing this, it's that as above, so below concept where you are going through in just this one little process, an example of the great process. And it's cool because it works on all levels. That's what I love about the science, is that it can be as big as you need it and as little as you need it. And then of course you can apply this in your internal spiritual alchemy, of course.
Agreed.
4 phases.
So this I have some slides after this, which I'll explain those in a couple moments as far as why I included those, because they're actually from the last episode that we did, but I thought it'd be important to include them here. Actually, Michael, you inspired me to do this one because you made a comment last, whoever we were interviewing, that someday we needed to do a whole presentation on the 7 rays. So I just gave a little teaser here as far as where the 7 rays fit into alchemy. And for some reason, I have not found anybody in the alchemical community, holler if you're out there, either from past ages or present time, that integrates the understanding of the 7 rays into the alchemical process. Now, if you understand the 7 rays, they are 7 qualities. Each of these qualities comes to us by way of, in alchemical terms, we call it the 7 sacred planets, but behind those are actual living, intelligent beings responsible for the creation of this realm in the first place. And even in the Bible, they talk about the 7 that sit upon the 7 thrones or something like that. And but there's constant reference. But the point is whatever your belief system is, or from whatever perspective you come from, we have to understand that those are qualities, and they can be best defined by the 7 ray qualities. And the 7 rays can be divided into the 3 principal rays. And let's see, what did I write? God, I did this late last night. The kingdom of man is a composite of the ray qualities inherent in the mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms, but uniquely imbued with the 3 principal rays for the possibility of individualization. Okay, so let's look at ray 1, 2, and 3. Ray 1, you could think of as the Father, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, all that kind of stuff that you and I learned in catechism. Ray 1 is the will force. It's the Godhead that is, or in the case of us co-creators, it is our individualized will force that is behind the whole ability to self-determine in the first place. Now, that will force has to be imbued, or let's just say gives birth to the Son. So we have the Father and the Son, and the Son, which was best exemplified by the Nazarene will say. It's the ray of love, wisdom. So pure love, unconditional, and wisdom, which is what we are here to gain through the whole journey.
What are the
And
colors
that
too,
is,
Barrett? What are the colors again?
there are different colors attributed depending who you read. I have my own preference, and my preference is based on what I have learned through my practices and what we'll loosely call the green books from the Saint Germain Foundation, which were the original next phase of theosophy, anthroposophy, although been distorted much since. But it's the original knowledge that was kept alive for centuries. And in that, you learn that in your forehead, in your forebrain, there is a sevenfold flame that, again, through holographic representation, is alive and well in that brain structure in order to allow the brain structure to exist and be the transmitter receiver that it is in the first place. So if you were to just go straight vertical up into that sevenfold flame, you would have a pure white flame, which would be attributed to the being Cyclopia, which is portrayed by the single eye. And there's a whole reason for that allegory. And it's not just the all seeing eye of the Illuminati. Again, they just steal these concepts and then invert them because that's all they can do. They aren't creative, they don't know how to do that. And if you go to the left, you have a Cassiopeia, which is the golden color. And each one of these attributes has special meaning. You go over to the right of center, you have Orion, which is green, which would coincide with science, in the terms of quality. Then you go down back to the left, and you're going to be in a hue of pink, which is the god of peace. Next step down on the right, you have the turquoise, which stands for purity. And then the two bottom ones that fan out on each side are Arcturus, which is the violet, which coincides with the seventh ray, which is what Saint Germain is the lord of the seventh ray for this incoming civilization. And then to the right on the other side is the ray of Hercules, which is a deep sapphire blue, which is pure power. Now, when you know how to do the 7-ray meditation, you would be amazed at how your brain structure just lights up. It's like somebody's literally inflating a beach ball inside your head, and you feel this immense, not pressure in a bad way, but just this presence, and with the ability to see each one of these colors firsthand. So, take it with a grain of salt. That's just my experience. And so those are the 3 rays, and the 3 rays are only active in the kingdom of man. And that means that man, out of the 4 kingdoms, which is the mineral, plant, and animal kingdom prior, they are each comprised of different rays. And that's a fascinating story that we do a whole presentation on, and how the human kingdom is really incorporation of all those qualities that make up all the kingdoms, but we're the only kingdom that has the 3 rays of principle, which again correlates to Mercury, Sulfur, and body of the old alchemical tradition, which means, guess what? You can think up a stuff, you can intend stuff, you can have passion behind doing things, and you can be a creator. And through that, go through the process of individualization, which is only possible in the kingdom of man. Now, to correlate that finally, and we'll finish up, we have 4 phases, which is talked about in alchemical circles. And Head Flux in our last interview, which was a great talk. I love that guy. He, introduced the traditional four categories, we'll say, of alchemical operation, which has to do with different Latin names that stand for different colors: black, white, yellow, red, which don't have anything to do with the colors we were just mentioning with the seven rays. It's an alchemical allegory, which is why, they pertain, or they designate these colors to each of those layers. But these phases really describe the process of, number one, separation, purifying, and cohabitation, which is putting together all the purified parts into an elevated, self-conscious, individualized whole. That is what the journey of the soul is all about. And what you got here? Okay, now I'll just finish this and then you can show that chart. So the quality, according to each of these phases and colors, with the first phase is dissolution. So if I'm in my chemical lab and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to calcinate, I'm going to dissolve if it's dry matter. If I want to dissolve wet matter, I'm going to do a process of putrefaction. But the whole idea is just to break down, and the human experience is breaking down the ego and old outdated concepts that are holding us back. And then we bring in the next phase, which is the moon. It's more the feminine, and it's about starting to bring some light in a muted way into that darkness, that we have just delved into as far as the dissolution or the dark night of the soul. And then we have the next step down, which is the solar, the masculine. And the masculine, correlated with the color yellow. This then also is left out of a lot of alchemical text where they only use three of the elements, but the solar is important, and it was left out because it brings into this whole thing that you brought up, Michael, which is the completion of the whole alchemical circle, the alchemical marriage, between these two steps, between the moon and the solar. So we can talk about the solar masculine, but it's really a completion, with that next element, which is the water element. If we go back to the beginning, and then the red in the alchemical world is about completion. It's about the philosopher's stone. You have learned how to do all of these processes to the point where now you have a medicine that is capable of rejuvenating in your entire body. And then the attributes that correlate with the phases of alchemy, if we want to go into the ray qualities, the first one of dissolution correlates with the fourth ray, which is harmony through conflict. It's about taking all of the traumas and the conflicts and the dichotomies that we experience in our journey through the polarities, and we somehow find harmony through that. And that's what that dark night of the soul is all about. And then we go to the next one, the lunar or the white phase, which is the fifth phase, which is the ray of concrete knowledge, which we talk about in the 7 ray principles. So that's about, through that harmony, through conflict, now you have knowledge. And now the solar is, also correlates with the heart, which is that heart connection. And through that, we develop a desire to unite with the divine, we'll say. And we can loosely call that devotion, which is what the 6th ray in the 7 ray schematic is all about. And then finally, the red is about the 7th ray, which is the ray of transmutation. It's the ray of violet. And that's the one that is most operative under the direction of Saint Germain at this time, as mankind is now waking up and entering into the final golden age.
I love that the final one, of course, red with transmutation, and then we have the red lion concept
Yeah.
of saying the elixir of life. It makes sense why they call it that. I won't bring that chart up now. I know we got to keep going, but yeah, we'll do another podcast at AlphaCast specifically on the 7 rays. It is interesting. I noticed on this chart though, on the 6th ray, which they relate to the day Thursday, and the Hawaiian Islands, peace and aloha, in terms of the retreat center, the nodal center in the known terrain of the realm. So devotion in the
So
Hawaiian Islands.
you're so I didn't catch that connection with Hawaii. What's that about?
Oh, so I'm looking at a chart of 7 rays of the individualized God self, and part of that they are relating each ray to the Elohim retreat centers in a way. And so you've got the first ray would be actually California, and then they
Oh,
relate
right.
Tuesday, and then second ray Germany, third ray Canada, fourth ray Russia, for the fifth ray China. Interesting. And the sixth, which is probably, of course, you're looking at Tibet. And then the sixth ray, the Hawaiian Islands. And then the seventh ray, Angola, Africa. Interesting.
Yeah.
Look deeper in these kind of charts.
Yeah,
I
it's,
mean, there's so
those are
much.
those are interesting to see
Yeah.
what ray qualities are prevalent, in every continent and country, and yeah, and each of us have a particular unique ray makeup, and that ray makeup starts with above our head the what we call the monad, and then we have the soul, which is a conglomeration of the three principles, and each of those three principles have a different ray quality. Um, and then that in turn connotes a collective ray quality for the soul, which is a composite of those other three. And then the body has, anyway. So we've talked about that a little bit here, where in past times where we've talked about making ray charts and things. I used to be involved with that with clients because I just found it very enlightening and helpful in a practical way. I had as you know, a long stretch of my life in the Hawaiian Islands, and a good buddy of mine who comes from a long line of kahunas. He helped me understand that the original language that we would think of as Hebrew, and we've mentioned this before, but it's appropriate here. The Hebrew language is actually an offshoot of a much earlier language that was used in a different time, and that the Hawaiian original language was very closely aligned with Hebrew because of its sharing of the common linguistic roots. And they also talked about, in the Hawaiian tradition, the Elohim, and the Elohim were understood very much in alignment with these qualities we're talking about with the 7 rays, and nothing to do with these flesh-eating giants. Certain Christian sects are out there saying, what the Elohim are and all this kind of bullshit. So sorry to step on toes, but I did it on purpose because it's kind of dumb and it just keeps us stupid. So if you want to go to the next slide.
You know what I've noticed too is I've been working with a client who is Finnish, and the language there in Finland is also somewhat
Nordic.
similar. Yeah, the Nordic languages, so we're talking about the diaspora from the Great Flood, right? From Atlantis.
Yep.
Hey.
Now, we don't have to go through these, but this will take less than a minute. These slides we had from our last presentation, and I just included them here in the event, Mike, that you include them in the show notes or in our member section, whatever, because I just thought it might be handy for at the end of this, for people that didn't see the first presentation, they can go through the different categories in a little bit more of an elaboration that explain uh, why disease, as we think of it in terms of symptoms, occurs, and why it has nothing to do with a disease entity or a pathogen or some spontaneous movement towards entropy, which is the whole model of scientism, where things expand to a certain point and then everything dies, just in case people are skeptical about the fact that we live in an actual death cult. So this firm one, form and function, relates to how deficiencies are really probably the number one cause of all of our ills. And we give some examples in there. And I'd encourage people to look on this slide. If you could move to the next one. We talk about the biome, and this expands on our earlier concepts today about pleomorphism, indigenous organisms in our body, how they go through 16 predictable mutational stages. Each one of those stages reflects the health of the ecosystem. For instance, if I look at somebody's blood and I immediately see fungal forms, or bacterial forms, or the first three stages of just the seed forms starting to take on more of a three-dimensional, form and shape, and understanding why they're doing that, what function they have, and what function fungal or bacterial form would have, what it would tell me that the body's trying to do in the first place. It would also tell me which organisms are active, and why they're active, what they're trying to do. It would also tell me the levels of tissues involved, which is going to be very, very helpful. And then as a physician, I can go in and interject into that transmutational chain and go in either direction, either progress up through that chain into greater differentiation, or retrograde, regress into the more simpler seed forms. And there's reasons why you would want to do either one, and that's where the knowledge of Bioterrain medicine and also the use of isopathic remedies of these organisms that live inside of us are extremely not just useful, but miraculous in their effects, and also explains why the Food and Death Administration has largely outlawed them in the U.S. Inc. here.
Indeed. So essentially what you're saying is this allows you to sort of go downstream quickly and remediate the process without having to, in terms of working with nature, not attacking it, not at war with it, but then also understanding that there is upstream causes of this too that are at the soul level that are really what need to be tackled, which I think we're going to be moving into in the next slide or something. But this is
just to keep it on a level of physiology, you can upregulate or downregulate. So let's just say you have a staph infection. We'll just keep using that example, and it won't go away. Well, that means you have a hanging conflict. We could talk about it from different perspectives, but just physical. For some reason, those bacterial forms that have progressed into the coccyx form, and what's then cultured and diagnosed as a staphylococcus infection. Well, if they're hanging out and just creating unsightly conditions on an area of your body and won't go away, it's because there's other elements in the bioterrain that are lacking. And so that's going to give you a clue as far as how to go elsewhere and to make sure that all the resources are available so that that bacterial form can do its job, go away, and then not have to be a nuisance forever. And in the case of where you're taking care of other elements in the bioterrain, then you would, of course, give the isopathic, that is the seed form of that staphylococcus organism, so called, and it would downregulate it into the seed forms, because you're basically saying, hey, good job, guys, you're done. Now go away. We've got the problem handled as far as why you were having to hang out there and overstay your welcome in the first place. And then the isopathics in that lower valence form are going to downregulate the larger bacterial or fungal forms and have them regress down into troops in waiting for when they're necessary again. Or maybe that staph infection isn't going away because there weren't enough of the troops in waiting. In other words, the seed forms of that particular cyclogeny, so that now the isopathic is going to plant those seeds in the bloodstream that then can pleomorphically go to the scene of the crime and help the thing resolve. So you've got all these different ways of looking at it, and a good doctor type is going to be able to think on his feet and figure all those things out. And see what else we got. I
And
think
yeah,
we beat that to death.
I would
Yeah.
say in the modern times, I think a lot of people are, their seed forms have been depleted in many ways through all the toxicity and diet and all that. So that makes a lot of sense. Bear, also, like, to go back to our example of staph quote unquote infection, like when I had that dog bite, when a dog came up at the farmer's market and bit my hand. Remember, we used ozone injection for that.
All right.
And I think it wasn't going away because I did have a hanging conflict and how I dealt with that and the trauma of the dog and the people who brought the dog and all that. It's interesting when you start to take it from a German medicine perspective. But ozone is another great, we've talked about it a bunch, right? But another great modality, right? In terms of
Yep.
down regulating.
So
would you explain that again?
yeah. So what happens when the bioterrain starts being compromised due to one of these categories, the biome, the deficiencies, the categories of disease, you name it? That is going to create consequences in overall physiology, which is the transmission and uptake of oxygen. And remember, oxygen is that transmitting conduit level of the etheric medium. It's the water element. And you need oxygen in order to transmit information, nutrients, provide the medium, for metabolism to properly take place, because in the absence, you're going to have fermentation. And that fermentation, as any alchemist knows, is the first step of negredo, which is the dark night of the soul, and dissolution, breakdown, decay. It's literally like, decomposing the body while you're still trying to use the darn thing in the first place.
Yeah, think of it. It's decomposing into the spirit. Alcohol, right?
Yeah. Or if you have these organisms that are stuck in these hanging phases and they're recycling your body, and you're saying, wait a minute, I still might want to use this thing. But it accelerates the breakdown and aging, not because that's their design. It's because the bioterrain needs support on many different levels. And then hydrogen, which is equally as important, and why we talk about aquacure and breathing hydrogen or Brown's gas, is because that is the fire medium. That is the original impetus to the electrical event that sparks the creative precipitation through the ethers in the first place. And when the bioterrain goes south, not only do you have a deficiency of oxygen for a whole bunch of reasons, but also a deficiency of hydrogen. And then what happens, the sequelae to those two events, is you have a dampening in the production of ATP, which is the engine gasoline for the cell. So if you're not manufacturing energy, ATP, then the machinery of the cell can't work. It's short of oxygen. Now you're going through fermentation, hydrogen. There's no way to, initiate that whole renewal process, which is what our overall realm and the realm of our physicality, our body is about in the first place. So, we're talking about these different things that can go wrong relative to the bioterrain. But then, bottom line, it all translates into no oxygen, no hydrogen, no energy. And that's why when I would take in a new client that had the big diagnosis, the first thing I do simultaneously to developing the protocols customized to their needs is I'd start repolarizing, reoxygenating, and doing the hydrogen. We had different ways of doing hydrogen back then before we had the great technologies that are available today. So what's next here?
You down with ATP? Yeah, you know me. Okay.
Okay, and then we talked about the 6 stages of disease, and this is what comes from the outside. Say you're breathing crap that they're spraying in the air, and if you're pretty healthy, your body's just going to upchuck it. You're going to barf, you're going to have the runs, sweat pores are going to be pouring this stuff out. You're going to get rid of it. You're going to go back to normal, even though a doctor says, "Oh, you have the flu." No, you're just composting and cleaning the body up. And it's an alchemical process if you understand how the body, under the direction of everything we've talked about so far, just gets rid of what it doesn't need. And then it stays in a certain phase. We'll call it the humoral phase. If you breathe something in that's noxious, it stays in the bloodstream. It's not good. It's going to make you sick and feel bad and necessitate some kind of upchuck mechanism. But if you're overwhelmed or if you're not that healthy enough to have that kind of reaction, then it's going to be deposited into the actual tissues of the body. We'll go through this real quick because we did it last time. Stuff can actually become pigmented into the body. Now you have, depending on and there's a whole chart we can make available for this. Yeah, depending where those things are deposited and how long they've been deposited, then it's going to explain why somebody has MS. And you're going to understand it according to the 6 levels or stages of disease, which was also understood but in Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine. Although they use different terminologies, they explain the same exact progression that the German medical doctors, Dr. Heinrich Reckwig, came up with his 6 phases of disease. And then finally, if you don't clean out the depositions in the actual ground tissue itself, then you have cellular changes and all sorts of bad things start happening. But when you look at these phases and somebody comes to you with a diagnosis, you simply understand, oh, this tissue is involved, it's in this phase, and so I have to now retrograde, take the body in the next direction, and I know how to do it because I know how the body works. I know the principles of transmutation, and if in fact, it's easier to go in the opposite direction than it is to go in the wrong direction. And people would often come to me with these issues and say, how'd this happen to me and everything. But I would simply say, well, you've been working on this for a long, long time, and your body has kept you out of the woods for as long as it could in the best possible way. But now it's just saying, no, you got to take care of business. You can't kick the can down the road anymore or make believe that you can get away with whatever you're doing in the first place.
Love it. Logical and very calm approach to what I think allopathic system could see as total, I mean, they put it way out of into left field with no concept of how to tackle these issues, right? So it's just like all trauma and all crisis, right? Everything's a frickin'
Yeah.
crisis. And here is saying,
They're
no,
into,
this is a
yeah.
process, not a crisis.
And, just my normal disclaimer, since I used to work in emergency services, obviously a time and a place. However, and that, of course, is what is showcased for the efficacy or to validate the efficacy of allopathic medicine. And they're right on in that example.
Yes.
But the fact is crisis intervention or emergency, true urgent situations are very small in number compared to people suffering from chronic degenerative changes, which are all related to what we're doing. So medicine leads with their heroic, life-saving persona and uses the same crisis intervention mindset, just trying to get the bioterrain back so that it doesn't have to talk to you with symptoms anymore. And because it doesn't understand these principles, then what they'll do is create noxious chemicals that create the opposite symptoms from the one you think you don't want or the one you equate with sickness. And then that, of course, necessitates your body moving further down that 6 stages of disease to where really nasty shit happens.
Yeah, I mean, great point. Obviously, as a volunteer firefighter, I'm not denouncing all of the crisis mitigation when you're at on scene, and people are bleeding out. That's in broken limbs and everything. That's where modern allopathy or the modern Western medical paradigm is fantastic at. But as you said, we're talking about
But you know
disease.
what? If you go back a few thousand years, the real practitioners, say within Chinese medicine, they knew how to set bones
Hmm.
and they actually did surgical things. And then they also knew how to do surgical things without opening the skin up. I trained a long time in osteopathic medicine with some brilliant people from Europe, and we could alter tissues within individual organs with our hands without going into body cavities. And it first started with developing the knack to ascertain the movement of every organ, because every organ, like every tissue, embryologically unfolds in a certain fashion. And then that direction of unfoldment, just like we're explaining how the heart unfolds because it's following function, then with your hands, you can put your hand on the liver or the pancreas, and not only can you feel it, but you can feel if the proper motion is happening. And with the same techniques, you can restore that motion, which also then restores the natural internal pathways where energy is conducted through those organs, and each one has a unique signature pathway. And Dr. Cream in biogeometry very astutely was able to understand this and actually draw out the biosignatures, which are like the meridian pathways for the body, only unique to the internal flow of each organ. So when you just with osteopathic technique, you can start restoring those normal patterns, work on it from all the other angles that we've done, and you find that the tissue changes that doctors thought maybe required, yanking out half your intestines or something, could actually be put right by a combination of all these techniques. I kind of believe that's possible because I just saw it happen thousands of times.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, next slide.
And we're about done. Um, I'm staying on these a little longer than I anticipated, so let's just finish it up. Line of resistance, we already talked about this. It's about looking at that electrical bottom line and then mathematically being able to figure out how to put the electricity right with simple clinical techniques, and then using that not only to create balance, but also to monitor how all of your other things are doing. Because if you're succeeding in all the other ways that we've discussed, it's going to show up in that line of resistance, which is going to improve. And again, to repeat, bottom line, we are electrical first. Okay, next. Miasm, this we're going to get into the levels of what we're just think of emotions and things. These are just right now just called collective karma, energy patterns that were aberrant and developed by entire civilizations and then remain in the human memory bank and come back to haunt us, but not really. It's an opportunity to get things right, not within our own individual worlds, but to help free our ancestors that came before.
Amazing. Yeah, we went deep into that in the first episode of the first End of Medical Mythology, part one.
And then the final slides here, we're talking about emotions that just come in, as an individualized product of past experience, whatever that means to you, conflicts or stress patternings that we acquire just going through our life experience and so forth. And then we talk about how how biology, this is the realm of New German medicine, which is an important component to understand, and how conflicts in the psyche then holographically are expressed through conditions of the body in order to relieve the pressure on the psyche, which is then going to assure that we do not get stuck in our major purpose, which is expansion of consciousness. And then, of course, the design of biologically expressing also has built into it a mechanism where it goes full circle so you don't have to live with some growth in your body forevermore, or that's going to actually become lethal and take you out.
Yeah, and I love the fact that what you say, human biology as a vehicle for rapid soul expansion. It's a back and forth. It's not just the end effect of the soul, but it actually has a function, right? It's a just as important. The salt, in other words, is just as important as the sulfur and the mercury.
And which brings us back to complete full circle with what the alchemist said, what Walter Russell said, which is there's only one thing. And through our consciousness, we can create motion, which creates appearance in the world of form, but none of it exists outside of our own self-created simulation within the larger creation of the seven Elohim.
Beautiful. Love it, man. That was quite detailed, and hopefully everybody who's watching this or listening to this, you can get out from this. If you're still kind of stuck in mire of this concept that it's a terrain theory, right? That this is all theoretical. Hopefully, we're laying out that no, this is an ancient science. This is how nature works, and the importance of this understanding can interplay into all new innovation in where terrain medicine and really just natural medicine can go back to for 21st century.
Amazing. Well, I hope that wasn't too boring or anything, but I just felt, especially since we had another opportunity for an in-house, I just thought, hey, good idea maybe to develop some principles that add some weight as far as what we talked about last time is actually a very practical, down-to-earth approach, as you already eloquently said, and this developed us even further.
I'm excited to do deeper dives into the individual elements of this presentation. And really, there's a lot of synchronistic. I don't like to say even synchromystic because that makes it seem like it's mystical or supernatural. but there's a lot of synchronicities between what I've been really investigating more with thinking and destiny, and I've been taking a more, I guess, defined interest into astrology. I never was really into astrology, and this last few months I've been getting more into it because it, as our friend Chance Garton always highlights in his show, it really is the connective, overarching canvas of reality that we can look at and to reflect back to us. And it's just really fun, man. It's fun connecting all these things through the sky clock. And then, of course, the importance of when we started with talking about fitness this morning, with the kettlebells that you use, and of course your what do you call them? Your what are those bad boys called down there? You want to show the audience that? And I bring this up because the importance of not only having reverence for the temple that we have, but the ability for us to elevate it in ways as expression, as in the art of what it is to be human, or womb man. Yeah, what are those clubs called?
These are club bells. I have a whole set of them, and I do my martial arts drills with these because it builds core rotational strength and it keeps you honest. Because when you get up in the heavy weight, this is actually pretty heavy. You cannot move these through the forms of my drills unless you're using your core. And so anyway, it's a great way to do things, and also it's the most basic form of exercise equipment. What differentiates man from animal is that we are the only species that can throw. And it's also, if you want to look at us as maybe some of the edge we've had on other species within nature, is we have this ability to use our upper extremities, throwing spears, to feed ourselves or whatever, in ways that.
Don't tell that to the monkeys at the zoo. They like to throw their poo.
Okay, maybe a bad example, but it is, and also, it's the most, it's the longest living age old form of exercise was kettlebells. If you go back to old Ayurvedic cultures where they had the original warriors and people, it was all about those kind of movements, and just for anybody these days that, isn't into spirit shocking, it's amazing to develop all the functional attributes of athleticism, whether you're competing or not, it doesn't matter. For us geriatrics, it's a great medium of exercise because it's going to prevent you from getting stiff, with reduced ranges of motion. It's going to keep your core active. And also it's kind of, it's playful, you get into the flow of things, and you just kind of lose yourself. And anyway, yeah, we'll do a lot on exercise, and exercise is so important because we're talking about self-determination today. Exercise is the one thing where you have an idea, you translate it into motion, and your motion immediately is a reflection of your intention. And for folks that do not do purposeful movement, they're really missing out on a great opportunity to demonstrate what happens when you exert your will force. And of course, all the other things that happen with the musculoskeletal massage of the lymphatics, the movement of energy that's facilitated through the meridians, and just the act of running, jumping, and playing is going to keep you healthy in and of itself.
Well, I can't agree more, Dr. Lando. If I'm not doing some rigorous athletic activity every day, I feel like I'm going crazy. Let's wrap this up. My dad's here. The dogs are going crazy. Remember, everybody, get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go plant something, go hug a tree, or go swim an ocean, a river, a pool. Get that rugged activity in nature is a great way to kind of, right, to check all those boxes, Bear. I'm going to try to go trail run today. Surf's too crazy right now. But thanks, everybody. The presentation will be in the show notes below. So check that out. And we look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Anarchapulco's right around the bend. alphavedic.com/Anarchapulco to get tickets still. Also Confluence, Confluence events, confluenceevent.com. That's coming up in April for the solar maxim there, the solar eclipse, excuse me, in Texas. Use winter 10 for a discount there. And then finally, Music and Sky are going to be here before you know it, summer solstice 2024. So keep an eye out for that. Love you guys, and
Hey,
we'll see
Mike,
you. Yeah.
stay on. Don't shut down Zoom down quite yet, so I can say hi to your dad after we hang up here.
Okay, cool. We'll do. And next Thursday, Eileen McCusick is back with us, which will be awesome.
Oh, fun. That'd be. I look forward to that one. Hey, love you guys out there in YouTube land. Keep up the good work. See you next week.
Cheers.